what we're going to do today is firstly we'll introduce ourselves and tell you a little bit about our organisations, and then we'll move into a deeper discussion, and hopefully we'll have some time after that for your questions. We'll make time for that, and after that we'll just give you a small takeaway to probably the most significant hint we could give you. And so if I can introduce myself first, only because I'm on top of that particular slide. I'm with the International Prader-Willi Syndrome Organisation, and I put this slide up. Many of you here in the room have already got well-established organisations, so this slide won't be all that much news to you, but it's really important, in my opinion, to have a lot of boards and subcommittees, but you've also got to make sure those subcommittees are working and working hard. And in our case, we're based in England, and people on the subcommittees are from all over the world, and they are continually having discussions with other people all around the globe. Oh, I'm missing one of my slides. Can't be on this particular one. And so we have a number of international outreaches. We have we use Project ECHO, which of course is based at the University of New Mexico, and we have established, so ECHO, for those that don't know about it, stands for Extension of Community Healthcare Outcomes, and it's a way of structuring all teach, all learn communities of practice. And so we have had 2 international health echoes around Prader-Willi syndrome. We've had 1 Latin American Spanish-speaking echo. So these are 10-month echoes, so you meet once a month for 10 months. We've had 2 echoes to train support workers. We're currently running an echo to train psychiatrists and psychologists in mental well-being in Prader-Willi syndrome. We had an echo to train people that were developing associations in various countries around the world. So it was a leadership echo, and we're hoping to very soon have an echo for people with PWS, because anyone that knows the community knows that they often don't have a voice, and so we want to train and teach them to speak up for themselves as well. Another outreach that we do is we provide diagnosis for anyone that lives in a country where genetic diagnosis is not available. So if anyone suspects you may have Prader-Willi syndrome, we post a blood spot testing kit. We have to train the doctor or whoever it is to make sure they don't give their DNA as well as the patient's DNA on the test. And then they post it back to Italy, where we have it tested. And then of course we have to post out all the right documentation so that they can talk to their patient if they do come up with a positive diagnosis. They're just 2 of the many things, and I think some of the other things we're doing will come up through our talk today. So I'm now going to hand over. Bojana, would you like to talk to this slide?
Yeah, sure, thank you. Hi everybody, I'm Bojana Mirosavljevic. I'm based in Serbia. First of all, as I heard, I'm the only and first one from Serbia, so I have the special privilege and honor. Thank you for inviting me. I hope not the last one. So, first of all, I am mom of little Zoya, who lost her battle against a rare neurodegenerative disease called Batten disease. She was only 9 years old when she passed away. She passed away 10 years ago. She was so young and so small, but she did such a huge thing for all of us. I am president and founder of Association for Rare Disease in Children based in Serbia. I also have privilege to be a part of Center for Rare Diseases and as a patient advocacy team member in global CRO company named ICON. It is really very good as a patient representative to be a part of that kind of team where patient voice is actually heard, so not just listen, actually value and heard. That is really a big difference. Also, by education, I am an embryologist, I'm chemist and embryologist specialized in pre-implantation genetic testing. And as you can see from all of my activities, occupation, jobs, my girl put me in the rare disease world. Before her, I didn't know what is rare disease actually. I didn't know that rare disease existed at all. So everything that I do is closely related to rare diseases. I think I will speak later about Zoa's law, or you want me now to present
I think
it, or
we'll
later?
talk about that later.
Later, okay, so I will explain that later. Just in shortly that I'm also editor in magazine only, and first magazine about rare diseases in Balkan region. That magazine got awarded from EURODIS, European Organization for Rare Diseases, Black Pearl Award, and also I am founder of a rare disease database for Balkan region. I will also explain that later. Probably I forgot something, but we will catch it later.
Thank you. A very busy person.
Yes. Don't mention that out loud.
So, would you like to start telling, introduce yourself and start telling us about this one?
Absolutely. No, thanks, James. Thanks, Bojana. Hi, everyone. I'm Arik Johnson. I'm the Chief Mission Officer at the Huntington's Disease Society of America. I will try to refer to it as HDSA after that because I will stumble it over it every time I try to do it, even though I work there. We are a US-based organization that was founded in 1967, but we've grown a lot since that time. And a big part of that is due to how we see ourselves as an organization, how we've developed our strategic plan and thinking about HD not just as a thing that America has experienced, because we know that is not the case, but how it affects folks across the world. So, we're guided by our mission and vision statements, which are really about improving the lives of everyone living with the disease and to see eventually a world where HD does not exist. So that is what guides us and how we think about engaging on a larger scale. James, next slide, please. Just a really quick touch point here. Huntington's disease is a larger rare disease. We know that, in talking to the folks up here on stage where there's, 1 in 1 million people living with a condition. Ours is a little bit more prevalent than that. But that does not mean that it is a well-known condition and even has global understanding. But there are organizations that have formed all across the world. So we do take part in a larger international group, but then I'll speak a little bit more later about a very specific effort that we do to make sure that the patient voice, as Bojana said, is heard in the process of research and clinical trial development, and how you bring that voice from everyone, even though they're not all in the room.
Thank you, Arik.
Thank you.
And Michelle.
Hello, so I'm Michelle Davis, and I am Executive Director of the International Fibrodysplasia Ossificans Progressiva Association. We call it FOP for short, or you may hear us call it the organization, the IFOPA or IFOPA. It depends on whether you live in the US or Europe. Everyone says it differently. So we are an organization that turned 35 years old today. We were founded by a woman living with the disease. She went to the NIH, because that's where you go when no one knows what your disease is. And they said, do you know other people have the disease? And she was shocked. And so this is before HIPAA. They gave her a list of 17 people with their contact information. And she went home and pulled her wheelchair up to her dresser and typed them all a letter. I was actually with her for her birthday a few weeks ago and saw the letter, a copy of the very first letter she wrote. And 10 of the people wrote her back, and they started the organization. And then they just wanted to learn, how do you do life? It's a progressively disabling condition where your muscle is replaced by bone. So they just wanted to learn, how do you eat? Do you have a career? Do you have relationships? How do you bathe yourself in a dignified way? So that's how they started. And then the next year, a father decided he was going to do a fundraiser, and that's how we started funding research. So we're an organization now that is global. In our mission, we serve families all over the world. We fund research, that's the bulk of our funding, but we also are very focused on family services and advocacy and awareness. And so we were founded in 1988 and began to reach out. They began to reach out and connect with patients from across the world. And in 1998, so 10 years later, there was an FOP Germany organization that was founded. And then you'll see that today there are 22 FOP national organizations serving 26 countries across the world. They are not affiliates or chapters of the IFOPA. I've worked in those models before. They are separate entities that are governed by the governing bodies of the country in which they operate. Some do operate and serve more than one country. For example, Sweden covers Sweden, Denmark, Norway, and Finland. So they really do what works best for them. But we are the only organization that has paid staff. All of these other organizations are led by primarily parents and a few patients. And so if you'll go to the next slide, you'll see that really what our focus is, our ultimate goal is a cure for this disease. And how do we do that? Well, of course, the research, that's where 2/3 of our budget goes. But what we know, and I was at the World Orphan Drug Congress, and I heard someone from Cure SMA say the exact same thing that we've been really living out, is that yes, you do the research, but first you serve the families. And you make sure that whether it is in clinical trials or in basic research that you're serving the families, but you also serve the families and provide them programs and services so that you can build a community and you can establish relationships and you can earn trust so that when things come through the pipeline and there are clinical studies and trials, you have the connection that it's going to take to get those things through to see if those are really safe and effective treatments. So that's been our model. We establish formal networks like the International President's Council that I showed you. We do an FOP family gathering. So we make sure for that gathering there's a success council that has representatives from all over the world. And then we always make sure that we seek out representation. We're doing a webinar this Sunday on clinical trials. And it's not just US families that are participating. It is full with, we have a panelist from Italy, a panelist from Argentina, from South America, and then we also have several from the United States. So we really try and be deliberate to make sure that all voices are heard. It becomes a little difficult when you're managing all these different time zones to figure all of that out. Everything we do is in English and in Spanish with AI translation in another 27 languages. So we really do try and make sure that we are providing not just just not saying lip service that we're doing this, but we really are serving and connecting the international community.
Michelle, thank you. Such busy people. I'm in awe. Perhaps if I start with you, Arik. You mentioned briefly your international work, and could you tell us a bit more about how you engage with the International Coalition? Sure.
Listening to the other panelists here, what Michelle and Bojana and James have shared, there's so many different ways that we can engage with our global communities, and the level of that interaction, the type of logistical things that go into making it happen can be overwhelming, especially when you are working in a small organization or with primarily volunteer-led organizations. So a lot of times the approach that I will take and our organization takes is really looking at who are the other groups that are out there that are working on the same thing that you are, who have the same reason for doing what you're doing, and finding ways that you can align with them really on the key elements of their mission, or the why they're doing what they're doing, the why and what they're doing, and find that common thread. And I think this is probably something that everyone in this room will agree with. A lot of times we're talking about research. How do we get research to happen on our disease? How do we get treatments developed for our disease? How do we get folks to engage in the clinical trials and research so that we can get closer to a cure, or in many cases, and in the situation with HD, just even better treatments for the disease. So that's a common thread. So working with all of these different international organizations, we started several years ago a joint venture with several different country-specific groups, the European Huntington's Association, the Canadian Society, or the Huntington's Society of Canada, and HDSA, to bring together representatives from different cohorts within the community to be able to have their voice heard in clinical trial development, in research, and to have that happen in a coordinated way and a supported way. This isn't an ad board. This isn't one person sitting at at the table at a drug company. This is a group, literally from around the world, who have said we want to be able to share our stories. So we will work with companies to bring them together with this coalition for patient engagement. We call it HD COPE. To bring them together to meet with folks and to be able to have conversations. What does it mean for you as someone who's living with Huntington's disease to take part in a trial? What does it mean for you to bring your loved one who's in later stages of the disease to participate in these things? What is it like to know that you're at risk for a disease and we're just starting to talk about possible treatments that might change the way that the disease carries out? Being able to get that feedback from the individuals directly is, as we all know, super important, but being able to get that feedback from people who are supported in the process, being able to provide the HD COPE team with education about here's language that you need to know when you're talking to scientists, when you're talking to clinical trialists. Here are things that here are ways that you can maximize your story and your impact when you share it with those folks that are holding an audience with you. Yeah. And then something that I think is super important, sorry James, I'll stop in a second, is you also are in a room talking to people from all around the world. So while you know your experience with the disease, you're also learning their experience. And so when you are going out and you're talking about it, you're now informed by things that you don't live yourself. You are learning it from your cohort, you're learning it from your friends and this family truly that develops. So it really is a way to inform, support the individuals so that they can go out and share their stories, but the stories of all the other people that they bring with them to the room and help move science forward.
It sounds quite complex, but you must be a very organized person to keep on top of all of that.
I am very lucky to work with some very organized people who are able to do this, but you're right, and to Michelle's point, it's like trying to juggle all of those logistics when you're trying to get someone from Italy and someone from Australia and someone from China and all these, and you find ways to make it work. It is not always easy, but it is important, right?
And Michelle or Bojana, can you add a comment to that international outreach?
Well, to be able to collaborate internationally in my region, we needed to overcome huge language barrier. So, when the parents find out for devastating diagnosis of the child, in one day, that parents became lawyer, social worker, doctor, nurse, parents, all in one person. Teacher, thank you. We can speak about that 1 hour, I'm pretty sure. And I'm a scientist, I hate law, believe me. Sorry if there is some lawyer here in the room, but I'm not a law person. But I had to learn that kind of stuff also. And just to start to collaborate with the folks internationally in other countries, we needed to educate ourselves a lot from the zero, from the beginning. And one of that, my husband very often jokes with me that we need to find a new place.
That we can, I know Michelle, you said they're not like affiliates or anything, but so that you can be a united front and kind of something to give them as a framework.
Yeah, well, we originally came together about 40 years ago now when we held an international conference, and we had lots of little groups like you're talking about. And so we developed a bit of a structure at that time. And we decided way back then that the full member countries had to have a registered association or a registered company so that they were quite transparent. And so they're the full members, and then the associate members are countries where we just happen to know someone. And so we obviously don't want to ignore them, and we want to train them up. So in some ways you're disadvantaged. Well, you're not disadvantaged because you get the same service from us and you don't have to pay fees if you're an associate member. But to have a structure like that, it might be really hard in a very rare disease group, but for the larger organisations it's quite a good structure. And then we meet every 3 years, and we're very particular to really look after our scientists for a couple of days. We have 2 days to look after the care providers because there's a lot of care in Prader-Willi syndrome support, as well as 2 days for family. And we hope to also have 2 days for the people living with PWS who have been missing out a bit up until now. Anyone else?
So we meet at least 4 times a year virtually. And those meetings are recorded. We provide professional translation for those meetings. So no matter what language you speak, we provide professional translation for that meeting. But different meetings have different topics, but there's always at least once a year where everybody goes around and talks about what are their initiatives for the year, or what are they thinking about for the next year. So we really try and avoid that crossover. If someone's saying, I want to do that, they can hear that someone has done that before, so they can kind of learn from one another. We do a lot of communicating via a big email group where people are asking questions of one another, but it's really just having those communication lines open and giving a platform for them to share about what the different things they're working on. And the organization FOP Friends in the United Kingdom, they have a wonderful mother and father that lead that organization. They put together this incredible school book, this guidebook for if you have a child in your school that has FOP, how do you care for them? It was a great idea. We're well, we didn't think of that, but we all kind of used it, and they share it. And we revise it for our different school systems, but really just learning what everybody's doing. And we don't always have, just because we're the biggest with staff, we don't always have the best thing. And just being open to, what else is someone doing, and how can we help promote that for them as well. One thing we do related to research is that we do have a scientific advisory board for our competitive grant program. And none of the other organizations really have anything like that. And so what we do is we give them an opportunity to participate in funding research. So we have all of the structure and the system and the call for proposals and the mailing list and all of that in place, but we basically treat them like a major donor. We go to them and we ask for funds to contribute to that grant program, and then they're recognized as one of the funders of that grant program, but they actually get to participate in research without having to have any of that structure and go through all of the hoops and the things that they need to do, but we kind of sort of provide that service to us, and they're sort of providing the service to us because they're giving us funding that we would have to go raise from somewhere else.
Now, as you can hear, we've got plenty to say, but we're nearly out of time, and we've only heard 2 questions. So perhaps one more question. Who's going to be the lucky person? Thank you.
Thank you. Wes Rogers with Sertra syndrome. We have 11 patients in our support group with 5 languages, I think 5 or 6 languages represented. So Facebook, we're very early on, and that's been a wonderful tool to be able to translate communication from everybody. But right now our communication is text, relying heavily on that. I'm wondering, do you have any recommendations on services, perhaps translation, to encourage more video interactions? Ideally, we like to move to in-person, but to move to the stage of in-person communication or face-to-face communication.
I'm going to give Arik or Bojana.
Well, I think you've got a tech answer.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. So we have been using Wordly that integrates with Zoom. And I should have brought the list with me because our family services manager is the main person that does it. But there's a couple if you want to come by, I can give you a card and share with you who we use. But our family services manager has done a lot of testing of different platforms. She's done pricing of different platforms. But Wordly was kind of where we've started. And one of the services we use is just AI, but then we also have some where you can be on a different channel and you actually have live audio translation during the calls. So I can share that with you. Sorry.
Thanks for your questions, guys, and please feel free to hijack us later if you want to ask us some others. But I'd like to just ask the panel for their very brief take-home, and perhaps we'll start with you, Michelle.
So I think the main thing is if you're working with the international community, you really have to manage expectations. We get requests, our staff is hit up all weekend long, different hours of the day. So, maybe you have a responder that says, here's our business hours in the United States. I don't want my staff to be overburdened either, but they do find opportunities to make themselves available at different hours. And I think the other thing is we can't do everything. If someone's calling me asking about, how do they manage the school system in Nigeria, we don't know that. And we're gonna not try and say that we're gonna try and figure it out for you. We're just gonna be honest and say, we can't do that for you. Perhaps there's a rare disease or a disability organization in your country that can do that, but we just really have to be honest and manage those expectations.
Thank you, Michelle. Arik?
That's awesome. When you are working with groups from other countries, and even sometimes within your own country, it's recognizing that there are different priorities. Everyone is approaching their way of dealing with this condition, with the disease that we're working with, and to recognize that there are going to be those differences. And it's an opportunity to find these areas where your missions align or overlap, and to really hone in on those commonalities, because that makes it easier to collaborate. That gives you the opportunity to find instances where you can work together, to come together to do a certain thing. You might not line up on everything, but if you can find those common threads, if you can find those areas, like I say, mission alignment opportunities, there's more that you can do. And that's something that I think crosses all borders.
And Bojana?
Well, to be able to survive these kind of battles, you just need to be stubborn enough to go on and go on and go on. So I find a million closed doors, really. And then in just a few seconds, one door's opened, and that's how Zoa's Law was adopted. So just never give up. We don't have that kind of luxury to give up. So that's
never give up. That's a good one. And probably my message would be, if you're given, you're offered an opportunity, please just say yes, and then work out how you can fit it into your busy day, because there are so many good offers out there, and just grasp them and run with them. So just say yes.